Welcome back to Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, presented by Zwift for the Queen stage of the Vuelta 2022, finishing on Sierra Nevada. Much sort of disagreement or confusion about this finish. It is the 23-kilometer long version, closer to 7%. It's not 8% average. The start is hard, 4.6K, 11%, and Alto del Perche beforehand, 9K, 7.5% as a warm up from Granada is pretty difficult too. Goes to 2,500 meters, but it's so shallow. Like when you look at this climb with sections of I think 6 kilometers after the steep section, averaging 5%. That's the draft is so important, and that's also below 2,000 meters. That's from about 1,600 to 2,000, so not high altitude yet. And so the question was, would Remco Evenepoel be able to hang on after losing 48 seconds to Roglič on Sierra de la Pandera yesterday, on what is probably the hardest mountain stage left of this Vuelta, and he's got a 150 lead in the red jersey. So other questions, Mas, Lopez, Astana, Movistar, how would they play the stage? And a huge break once again, Benji, with almost all the GC teams represented.
Yes, certainly. And the teams that we expect to see some riders go up the front as well. I think the only team that I didn't expect to see in the breakaway necessarily was Astana, who had Nibali and De La Cruz go in the breakaway. When I saw that, I was like, oh, what is their plan here? Because I expected Astana to be the team to see the finish and say, Sierra Nevada, very high. We like that. Lopez likes that. So let's try and control this stage, control a breakaway, and make sure that we see something happening in regards to Lopez winning the stage. I think that's what Astana's plan should have been at the start. Now, they had attacks, including Vincenzo Nibali being up there. The Shark of Messina, second time he attacks in this Vuelta, and the first time that we see him on TV. So that was a wonderful experience as a Shark fan. And Jay Vine was in that group as well. I think we had multiple people trying to be up the road, but it really came down to a really large group after quite a bit of fighting in the breakaway. And we also saw another Astana rider eventually in a group that bridged to the front riders that were already up the road, De La Cruz. So 2 riders from Astana in that group. We saw the likes of Dennis from Jumbo, who was initially in the break, and we had Allman bridge up a bit later. When it comes to Quickstep, 2 riders in the breakaway as well. And once you see 2 riders being in the breakaway from Quickstep, then I'm thinking, okay, Jumbo has 2 riders in the breakaway. Quickstep has 2 riders in the breakaway with Vervaeke and Masnada. What is their plan here? We've got that Alto del Purque. I will keep on mispronouncing it most likely, the second last climb. Can they already use satellite riders on that climb? I didn't think so. We were, I think, thinking about potentially somewhere on Sierra Nevada because, like, when you see Sierra Nevada, where on that climb, this first part being the steepest, second part being the more shallow section, where is the best part to have satellite riders?
So what you'd want is Hessink to pace the 7.5% climb very hard in the heat to just put some kilojoules in beforehand, and then he or Omen preferably to pace the 5% climb, and then you would have Harper smack the Hazalanas and Dennis wait on the shallow section to pull where they're going 35 kilometers an hour in his wheel, and he's like 70 kilos plus, so he's, in his wheel, you might be doing 5 watts per kilo. He might be doing 5.5, but a skinny 60 kilo climber, not, like a Rodriguez out of the draft, they will be doing a lot of watts behind. So it's the problem for Jumbo Visma, I guess, was Quickstep being in that break is tough because Vervaeke is in good shape. So I was surprised Quickstep actually went with that strategy. It's kind of like what Jumbo did in the Tour on a lot of stages. And also, Omen being in the break, he can't really help. Like, the only way he can help is to keep the break ahead and to pull, and he didn't really do that.
Yeah, I agree with that point. And that's the dynamic you see between those 2 teams in the breakaway. I think Quickstep's goal is simple. Keep Quickstep riders in the breakaway as long as possible, hoping that they survive longer in the stage and can help Remco Evenepoel at any point where needed at the far end of this race. And I think that was their plan, and the execution, we'll talk about it in a bit. Now, otherwise in the breakaway, McNulty, Soler, that's a duo for UAE. I was never expecting that duo to actually drop back unless they were not in a position to win the stage. Drop back to help out Almeida and Ayuso, for example. Again, unless they are in a position where they can't win anymore. Arensman for DSM, some random riders like a Goldstein, like Oliveira as well. I wasn't sure if he was going to make it until Sierra Nevada in this breakaway, to be honest.
Well,
Jay
here's
Vine,
another one.
Meurice. Sorry?
Movistar keep getting Oliveira in breaks where he can't help. It's completely
Yeah.
pointless. You have Mühlberger, Verona, Valverde, and you're putting he's strong roulette. Why the fuck is Oliveira in the break?
Yeah.
Like, it's the wrong. Maybe like Verona can make a break. I'm pretty sure Carlos Verona can make a break. Now maybe he
Yeah.
didn't. I don't know if he was trying. I didn't see it, but they keep getting the wrong guys in the breaks. And it's because they're too scared not to have Carlos and Mühlberger around Mas. But like, you got to risk it for the biscuit, and it's not even a big risk either. So again, they did the same thing on the other day, and yeah, it doesn't help at all.
Is there an aspect to it where they don't expect Quickstep to keep the break as close as Quickstep is doing on stage? Because Quickstep is getting, well, the break pretty close on each stage, 4 or 5 minutes, never really much more. Today they actually had help because in the breakaway, Arensman, Hindley, and so forth, these riders are relatively close in GC towards Damon, no, not towards Damon Arensman, that's the guy that's close to GC, towards Ben O'Connor, the leader of Age Desert in GC. So they were getting scared and they were starting to defend their 10th position. And Age Desert started pacing and helped Quickstep on the stage, basically, on the first parts of the stage. I think before Purke already that Age Desert was pacing. And that changed the dynamic even more, where the tempo in the peloton was higher. And did that also make a difference when it comes to the dynamic in the breakaway, you think? The fact that Age Desert was pacing, or
I think so. I think this completely ages to stuffed Jumbo Visma's plan today because Dennis is not good on like 4Ks 11%. And so even if Dennis stays ahead on Hazalanas, if he's only getting 30 seconds rest and he has to do that climb full gas to start ahead of the GC group, he's not going to be as useful on the shallow gradient. So AG2R and AG2R paced too hard. It was almost a little bit panicky, actually. And maybe they had to because Aronson was super strong in the end, but they were pacing so hard that they blew up their whole team. They then ripped the base of Perke in the first 500 meters, and Jumbo were like, "What are you doing?" Because we need to steadily bring this back. Jungels and Van Wilder gets dropped, and he comes back when Jungel starts pacing at a much slower pace. That gives 30 seconds back to the break. Vine is pushing, trying to drop Arensman and get KOM points because Arensman's the reason he's getting chased. And then in the valley afterwards in descent, Jumbo Visma are like, we need to give some time back to Dennis so he can get over Hazalanas. And then the gap goes to 4.5, 5 minutes again.
Yeah, and the interesting part about it is that there was this moment in the descent before Sierra Nevada where Roglič was actually behind the GC group for a bit, and I didn't exactly know what was happening. Some people were saying he took a piss by the side of the road and so forth. Bit of an odd time to take a piss. Perhaps it was really necessary at that point. Perhaps a mechanical that we don't know about. Who knows? He was behind a bit. Jumbo kept pacing a slow tempo at the front to make sure he could come back, and that was settled before we started Sierra Nevada. In the breakaway, I think Craddock went on a bit of an adventure, or that was a bit earlier in the stage, I don't know. But basically, I think Craddock had the lead at the foot of Sierra Nevada, right? With like 45 seconds on a
Vine.
bigger group, or was it Vine?
Vine had bridged across to Craddock
Yeah.
on the Sierra Nevada on Perke to take KOM
Yeah.
points. They did the descent together, and then Vine, I think, sort of semi-paced a reasonable pace. But before we get into the main GC action, it's September. Autumn's here in the Northern Hemisphere. Indoor season is here, which means it's time to fire up the Zwift subscription. If you paused it over summer, a whole raft of updates landing soon, including the ability to chase your PB Ghost across segments, a new race series, and even new roads. Plus, with training series like Zwift Academy starting, there's never been a better time to give indoor training a shot. For more information or to start your free 7-day trial, head to Zwift.com using the link down below. But yeah, we basically there's like a 6K 5% climb before Sierra Nevada. Jumbo-Visma give back time to the breakaway, but Dennis has been dropped on Perch as well as Omen. And so with AG2R pacing and those two being dropped, Vervaeke hasn't been dropped. So he's in a group now, Vine's waited, and there's a group of the best climbers in the breakaway ahead that are going to start Sierra Nevada first. Gino Maeda, who kept waving the motorbikes away from in front of his breakaway group, which makes no sense. David de la Cruz, who stopped pulling and we thought was a satellite rider for Lopez, but I think was secretly hoping he could move up on GC. Uran, Hindley, Vine, Aronsman were the best climbers in there. Carapaz as well. So a lot of riders who could potentially be satellite riders, Vervaeke too, a lot of riders, and some riders going for KOM like Vine, others just going for the stage and GC like Aronsman and Hindley. And so Jumbo-Visma give time back, and then they start smashing it again because Omen and Dennis have dropped back, and I think they were like 2 minutes ahead in no man's land. They figured they weren't going to make it over Hasalanas. Their plans kind of done before the Sierra Nevada had even started, and particularly with Vervaeke ahead, that makes it really, really hard. It's like a Wout van Aert, Pogacar, Murder Begur situation with the satellite rider. And yeah, Hazelana starts, and Omen does the same thing the AG2R rider Benji did at the base, just rips it.
Yeah, super odd to see because, let's be honest about it, Vuelta has not had the best TV direction of a Grand Tour, and because of that, we don't exactly see what every group is doing, and we see snippets of what Jumbo is doing in the peloton. Towards the bottom of Sierra Nevada, they are smashing it in descent for a tiny bit, and they go through some houses and straight up start smashing it at the bottom of Sierra Nevada in the earlier steep section, so the Hazayana section, the early parts of it, and it's kind of like a team time trial that's falling apart when you see the front on shot, because some Almond's kick was so hard, just like, as you said, the Age des rider at the foot of the previous climb, that the rest of the team kind of can't follow, because Dennis cannot follow that on a steep section. There were gaps from Dennis towards Almond, so if that is happening, you're not benefiting of being in the wheel of that person anymore, and your train kind of looks like one rider 10 meters further the other rider, 2 meters further the other rider, but despite that, whatever they were doing still damaged the group significantly, because Orman kept on riding 10 meters ahead of everybody for a bit, because that was happening, and behind every single Jumbo rider just kept on doing what they were doing until they were done for, and then went to the side, and it came down to Roglič and multiple GC riders, with Harper being the one Jumbo rider still in sight in the back of a group, and we had a situation with 20 kilometers left in this stage, 1 kilometer into Sierra Nevada, where we had like 5 riders at the foot of Sierra Nevada. And that is actually insane. Like, it is mad how this climb opened up in like the span of a kilometer, right? With a single move by Sam Ullman, a guy that I haven't seen do anything for Jumbo in the last 2 years.
Yeah, and it's funny that like Ineos have drilled it into the base of Sierra de la Pandera, and then when it really mattered yesterday, Rodriguez was in bad position. When it really mattered today, he entered Hazalanas in bad position. I don't know where UAE were; they couldn't even see them, and so it didn't hurt Remco. O'Connor was in good position. Lopez, Massa there. Roglič is there on Harper's wheel, but the UAE and Ineos guys started this climb on the back foot and were literally fighting to get back from that position for the next hour. And like that's how much it cost them. And the draft is so important on this climb. And so Harper paces, and then Roglič, I don't know, he sort of surged Benji, but it wasn't the same snap as yesterday on Pandera. He starts pacing with Remco in the wheel on Hazalanas. We're thinking Remco's looking a lot better than yesterday. He doesn't get separation, Roglič. And eventually, Roglič moves to the side, and Evenepoel starts pacing this group about 2.5, 3 minutes behind the breakaway, which is still Vine, Aronsman, David de la Cruz, Carapaz, Soler, and Co.
I think at this point, Soler had taken a bit of an advantage on the rest of the breakaway riders, was riding roughly 25 seconds ahead of the group with Aronsman and so forth, Vine and so forth. So an early move by Soler on the Sierra Nevada climb as well. So that's the front of the race, basically. Soler, the group of Arensman, Vine, and so forth behind that. I don't think the gap was too significant, 20, 25 seconds max on this climb. And as you said, 2 minutes 30 towards the group that includes the GC riders that were left in that group. And let's talk about the order of GC riders right now, because some of them were not in that group anymore. As you said, Evenepoel was now pacing in this group while Roglič had moved to the back. I think Mars was in that group. Lopez came back to that group after not initially making the group. And when it comes to Ineos, both Hart and Rodriguez missed the initial attack to that group, missed the Jumbo move, and weren't in that group. But Rodriguez was able to crawl back with Hart in the wheel, it seemed like, for some reason, in the back. Hart then dropped off Rodriguez's wheel while Rodriguez made it back to the group
And
of
Hart attacked,
Roglič and
didn't he?
Evenepoel. What, sorry?
Before, I remember Hart, we forgot to mention it, Teo Gegenhardt did like an Esteban Chavez, Danny Navarro TV attack. I was like, what is he doing?
I swear it was even before the Sierra Nevada climb officially started.
It was.
He kind of like
it was
did
on
it.
like the uncategorized 5%.
But anyway, that aside, Gegenhardt aside, because to this stage he wasn't really overly relevant. We now have a situation where that Evenepoel group is ahead of Ayuso, who was behind. I think 20 seconds behind that Evenepoel group, with Rodriguez in the group of Evenepoel at this point as well. And then 20 seconds behind Ayuso, we've got Almeida in his usual thing. 45 seconds dropped at the foot of the climb, and then we might see him again towards the end of the climb as usual. That's just how Almeida works at this point, right? Because like on the steep section, this might help him with his like keeping his tempo,
doesn't.
but on the draft it doesn't, right?
It's so stupid. He must be able to go quicker on Hazellanas. He must, because even if he's like, all right, if I'm doing a TT, this is how I would pace it, and I would go 5% faster than if I would do over my threshold on Hazellanas. But this is why we kept talking about satellite riders. There's a 4% section for like 7 kilometers. It might have even had a headwind on it. It's on a wide highway. And draft is so, so important. So you get a massive advantage just by clinging on to the group, and then you can recover below your threshold. And instead, he just does the entire climb at max pace, mostly out of the draft. So it cannot be the most efficient way to do it when you add in group dynamics and drafting. So Ayuso, the Soler ahead, and then he eventually gets clawed back by Arensman much later in the stage. But yeah, Roglič can't crack Evenepoel, but Evenepoel then links up. They get to the end of Hazellanas. Rodriguez dropped with the 2 other Iberian riders behind him, and Bavaca's there, the saviour. The defensive satellite rider goes to the front and starts pacing for Remco at a comfortable pace. Roglič at the back, and every kilometre that ticks down, it's good for Remco. He's got a 150 gap.
Exactly, and Roglič didn't look comfortable at that point. Like, Lopez still looked like he had something in him. Mas still looked fine. Roglič didn't look good at the back of the group. Rodriguez actually dropped under the tempo of Vervaeke, which is mad. Louis Vervaeke is genuinely, I think a lot of people would have said at the start of the year that he wasn't a godlike transfer towards Quickstep, but I think this Vuelta, he's proven that he's at least a decent domestique in this Vuelta. Because the man like was literally at a certain. I swear Roglič was dropping for a second, and he then crawled back to the wheel. Roglič had weakness at this point, regardless of what happens at the end of this stage. I feel like Roglič was having trouble holding on at this point in the race, and the plan of Jumbo didn't really work out. Let's be honest about it. On this climb, they did not get what they wanted. Roglič was at the back of that group, and Evenepoel and Vervaeke were in control there. And then we're looking at the situation, and yeah, it's good for Remco, but we saw a move. Somebody started attacking in the group, and that is the man, the favorite for the stage, right? Or was he not betting favorite?
He was the favorite, yeah. Miguel Angel Lopez, he got kind of stuffed, I think, today. So the break was just hanging at 2 minutes. Vervaeke's not pulling it back at all. It's 8Ks, 9Ks to go, and David de la Cruz is just sitting there. And we're still on a flat section. And Arensman's attacked. He's gone. He's gone past Soler. Arensman's looking good. Big ring on the climb. And Lopez attacks. And I'm thinking, where's David de la Cruz? Because first I thought David de la Cruz should have come back to pull harder, because I swear Roglič was in trouble and not looking great at points straight after Hazelanas, but he didn't. And Lopez attacks. He's attacking on a 40-kilometer-an-hour section. And I know he's aerodynamic on the climb, but it's costing him a lot. And eventually, after Mas bridged, I think maybe up to him, or I'm not
Yeah.
sure, De La Cruz comes back on the steeper section and starts pulling hard when Miguel Angel Lopez had just built out a 20-second gap on the flat. It's like when Vika's been pacing, who's heavier than him. So the timing of the satellite riders on the particular parkour didn't work for Astana. Lopez had to spend a lot. Mas completely faked me out. I thought he was about to drop, and then he says, call an ambulance, but not for me, attacks. And this is the curious part where I think if Roglič felt really good, he has to go with those two in
Yeah.
that moment. The guy who's third on GC going ahead, the guy who's the best on this terrain going ahead. Draft's important. So they have a satellite rider ahead. Remco's got no one. He's just on his own. If Roglič feels good in that moment, he has to go with him.
Yeah, exactly. And he did not. He stayed in the wheel and he wasn't really moving. Mas was moving up towards, well, Mas made that move towards Lopez. Lopez with De La Cruz, who came from the breakaway, like you mentioned. And we've now got that scenario ongoing where they're picking up riders left and right from the remains of that Vine group. That group was basically out of the question because Arensman, who caught up with Soler, had dropped Soler, Tham and Arensman, and he started keeping the gap towards Lopez's group. And that's something I wasn't expecting. I expected Lopez, Mas, De La Cruz to be able to, maybe not necessarily under the pace of De La Cruz, but I expected at least Lopez to later take back time towards Arensman towards the end of the stage. But there was this moment where Lopez kind of lost the wheel of De La Cruz for a second and then
He
nodded his
told him to
head.
slow down.
Yeah, what was that on purpose? As in, he was not being able to follow, or he was like, "I need to recover a bit so I can go later."
He needs to recover. De La Cruz has just waited, and so he has just had 2 minutes, 4 minutes of rest, and it's the steepest section. Lopez just attacked. And yeah, Arensman's gone. They never bring him back. Vine is working, and then I think eventually drops Hindley at a point, but he's sort of going for KOM points. And yeah, Arensman's able to win this stage easily, the Dutch rider, and move up on GC despite AG2R's best efforts. O'Connor has a great day. And yeah, it's just situation. De La Cruz pulls off. Lopez and Mas just not working well together. Lopez is doing most of the initial pulling.
Yeah.
Now, it's hard to know how riders feel in every moment, but the way he finished this climb, I think Mas cost himself today. I think he tried to be too clever with it. And the way he finished so strong, he eventually was cajoled into pulling, and suddenly the gap is extending to Evenepoel and Roglič again when he's pulling. I'm like, well, if you got good legs, why aren't you pulling with the guy who's second ahead of you behind? Lopez is sixth on GC. Who cares? And like Lopez was pulling, and then Mas wouldn't pull, and Lopez was like, "Fuck you," and then he'd attack him. That's how I saw it working. Behind Ayuso and Almeida,
Yeah.
I think they were trying to work Rodriguez over. They were doing it just in a really clumsy way. Eventually, they do work him over after Carapaz had been pulling them after he dropped back from the breakaway. Ayuso eventually drops Almeida and goes past him. We don't really see what happens after that. But yeah, Remco pulling the whole time. Just pull for Roglič, keeping the gap stable. I think it's the only thing he could do. You can say, oh, why is he giving Roglič a fair ride? But like, if he stops, then O'Connor attacks. And then Roglič might attack him. Roglič has got a better burst. And then you've got this stop-start. It's better to just get to the finish as quickly as possible. You've got a 150 gap. Okay, he's going to attack you at the end, which is what happens. But yeah, that's the way to play it. But anyway, Mas eventually pulls. Arensman wins the stage. Mas finishes second, gapping Lopez on the line. They'd collected J Vine in the process. Arensman, he beat the breakaway by 130, Jay Vine. Lopez third, taking 4 bonus seconds. Roglič attacks Evenepoel at the end and finishes on 144, 15 seconds ahead of him. Ayuso comes out of nowhere again. Like, it's incredible that Ayuso's finished 11 seconds behind Roglič, given he did the entirety of the climb, either out of the draft, like positioning at the start just stuffed him. Hindley Then Menkes, Evenepoel on 159. Almeida on 210, only 11 seconds behind Evenepoel. Rodriguez loses 1 minute, 30 to Ayuso. And to be honest, you'll look at the results and you'll see, Roglic has gained time on Evenepoel again, but Evenepoel did a higher level performance in terms of watts today on Sierra Nevada. He had to pace the entire climb. It's 6%, 5%. So I would say this is much, much more encouraging for Evenepoel than the stage yesterday. But yeah, huge win for Arensman. And he also moves up 3 spots on GC. Evenepoel still leading by 134. Mas on 201. Ayuso moves up into 4th on 449. Rodriguez on 516. If Mas had pulled a little bit more, or De La Cruz had pulled earlier on the flat, Lopez would be in 5th, but he's not. He's in 6th, 8 seconds behind Rodriguez. Almeida on 7 minutes, Arensman in 8th on 7:05, O'Connor in 9th on 8:57, and Hindley on 11:36. And it's funny, the Guillaume Martin strategy, it works most effectively when no one else is doing it, but because everyone from 8th through 14th, 15th is getting in the break, no one's moving up that much.
Yeah.
Although Arensman did today. So yeah, I think that today went about as well as it could have done for Evenepoel, even though he lost 15 seconds to Roglič in the end.
Yeah, I think so as well. Now, one of the things I noticed is that Uran also moved up 6 spots, did exactly what we expected any Ev rider to do, but like you mentioned, he did once, and that's why he's not in the top 10. Meanwhile, the other 2 Ev riders are completely gone in GC, Hugh Carthy and Podden, so that's not happening anymore for a potential top 15 in GC for them. But I do want to mention, over the last few years in cycling, I think over the last 5 years, I swear Astana has been one of the teams that has been criticized a lot when it comes to tactics. Like, I think Lutsenko and Westra back in the day on the Brugge de Panne, where they got rolled by Christoph, for example. That was one of the most tactical mistake races in years, together with that Quick Step one, of course, that of course, in Omloop, that Standard rolled them. But I feel like they've also had some very strong tactical work when it comes to satellite riders. I strongly remember Scarponi, Kangerts, Tarame all doing satellite rider work for Vincenzo Nibali in his prime, where they went up the road. Eventually, I saw Scarponi waiting by the side of the road for Nibali for that team. Today we saw it with Lopez having De La Cruz doing it. Ideally, it's on a better place on the climb, like you mentioned, but it's a team that very heavily seems to use this strategy. Also on the Basque Country stage, 6 last year or 2020, I don't know which one it was, the one where Roglič did his majestic coup and Astana fired up the descent of the Gorza climb or whatever it was called. And they also had multiple riders in that breakaway as satellite riders. I think it goes under the radar how many times Astana tries using satellite riders in races.
Yeah, but they were terrible today. They completely sold Lopez. They sold him in I don't know what this guy's done in a past life. He just gets sold, man. Favorite for the stage. I know Mas eventually beats him. You can't know that or expect that maybe in advance. And they're not helping control the break with Fedorov or Batistella. Lutsenko today finishes on 35 minutes, just doesn't try at all. Because you don't think, I don't know where, let me see where Hessing finished. Just to see, there's a big group over Perk. Lutsenko drops before on the base of Perk. He's just not trying for Lopez. And you don't think he could have pulled the false flat, let the break get too big, and then De La Cruz. Yeah. It just, there's teams within a teams there. Lutsenko gets to do what he wants to do, and Lopez, decent performance, but he really, from the Queen stage, with his legs and his shape, to still be finishing the stage in the same GC position and not without a stage win is a disappointment. But I think it's curious how Evenepoel or Roglič became the favourite yesterday. We've got the rest day podcast tomorrow. We have a rest day on Monday. But this third week, if you don't know the Vuelta, it's not like the Giro 2021 with Sega de Ala, with those sort of climbs, which Yates and Caruso could attack. Egan Bernal. This third week of the Vuelta is ridiculously soft. Like, it's just ridiculously easy. So I think Evenepoel, like, how would you rate the team strength, Benji? Quick Step against Jumbo. I'd say it's fairly equal. I would say Harper is a better climber, maybe to reduce a group than anybody on Quick Step, but Cavagna and I'd say it's pretty equal.
Yeah, I think so as well, and especially because, well, Quickstep has off days with certain riders. Like Van Wilder was nowhere today; he didn't do that much today. I think Masnada crashed out of the breakaway, so let's hope he's fine for Quickstep for the coming days. Like Vervaeke was the one that stepped up today from the breakaway and performed as he should, and there's always one on each stage that performs higher than his average performance rate. And that being the case, make sure that they've always got a domestique that is one of the stronger domestiques on the day. Cavagna is always consistent when it comes to his early riding, so he can control in some shape or form on the majority of stages. He can't do that on a mountain stage. That's obvious. It's Rémi Cavagna. He's not he's a hit TGV, a train, so trains don't go uphill. Anyway, when it comes to the rest, like, Jumbo is also inconsistent in that sense. Harper is indeed the most consistent one. I think Haysink has been really strong in this Vuelta, to be honest. But he's also not the rider that is going to do the last pull for the team. That kind of stuff. Dennis has been inconsistent. Omen, it's the first time that I saw him at the front of a race today in a very long time. And that's kind of it when it comes to those two teams, I think, based on what I expect. But there's also like things where you never know what can happen in the last week of a Grand Tour. Like, I swear in 2012 Vuelta, the last week, was a pretty hard last week. Like stage 20, Bola del Mundo, big climb at the end. But the majority of action happened on a stage that was not a big stage. I swear there was a random stage where Contador took like a minute 30 on people by going a crazy breakaway,
Fuente
which was
Day,
not a
was it?
mountain stage at all. What was it called?
Fuente Day, Contador.
Yes. Yeah,
Was that where
correct.
he met up with Scarponi, and Scarponi
Yeah.
was the Contador's car was giving food to Scarponi. It was great stuff. Just Patron stuff. That was when cycling was glorious. Before stat nerds like me ruined it when there was honor in the peloton. I don't know because Remco's the Shepdale Scud, the Aero Bullet. Like these 5% climbs, they suit him and Vivarka and Cavagna and
Yep.
Van Wilder. The team is pretty strong, so I think it's going to be extremely difficult to beat Evenepoel. Like extremely difficult. He had a bad day yesterday with the hip. It seemed better today. Couldn't drop him on Hazellanas. I thought that's where he has to be dropped, and I really don't see how anyone beats him now. And I think, I don't really believe in, like, it's funny is the narratives, isn't it, Benji? It's like he spent too much early on Pico Hano. He spent too much. Like, okay, but now he has a gap before a soft third week where it's much easier to defend, where draft is important. Like, if he doesn't, say, and I'm not saying Roglič could always have done this in his career, say Remco has the Roglič strategy where you just take 20 seconds and bonus at the end, not the full, you don't go fully in, take the 1 minute, 1:30. Well, and then you have a weekday and off day like Roglič has had in races, then you don't have the buffer. Same with Bernal. Bernal went full gas Giro 2021 first week, had the buffer, survived. That's why I don't really believe in conservation on suitable early stages.
I think it depends from rider to rider and the situation in the Grand Tour itself, but it's also obvious that the initial part of this Grand Tour fit Remco quite a bit. And Sierra Nevada was on paper the one where that was risky for Remco Evenepoel, as we hadn't seen him on altitude, for example. I'd argue he did pretty well on altitude based on his result. And I think it's also the maturity when it comes to Remco, when it comes to his riding, because he didn't have those moments where he completely exploded because he followed the wheel for too long. It looks like he drops off the wheel earlier. He even said after yesterday's stage in his post-race interview that he regrets following as long as he did because he felt like he was probably going a bit more than he should have to be able to sustain a better gap towards the end yesterday. Perhaps he kept that in mind for today and was like, okay, I should not close attacks vividly and I should keep my own tempo and I should make sure that I can keep gaps as much as possible, keep something left when other people attack that I don't get destroyed. And I think that helps him out. I think that's clever with the kind of rider he is. And I think it's going to be tough for Remco not to win this Grand Tour, but I hope there is a spark of something where Remco has another bad day where he loses another 30, 40 seconds, that we get some tension towards this Vuelta, because, hey, I'm here for the entertainment, as always.
Hopefully. It will require, I don't know, I worry there might be some, everyone will attack each other for positions in the top 10. Might happen a little bit more. I also think we already saw today teams willing to help Quickstep. In terms of KOM battle, Vine is on 59 points. He extends his lead. He's on the 29 points ahead of Carapaz. Carapaz, I think, is interested in stages more than the jersey. And points, Pedersen's still very, very comfortable there. Youth, Ayuso actually now truly takes it. He's ahead of Rodriguez, and UAE are leading teams classification by 30. So we'll go over the situation tomorrow, third week predictions, as well as a proper stage 16 prediction. But yeah, I think there's no way to make this the penultimate climb, isn't it? It finishes at the top. You can't descend Sierra Nevada. I don't know. It's just it could have been chaos if you had something a bit harder than this, because there wasn't many climbs before. Yeah, Alto del Per, but when I reflect on this stage, will I remember it for the rest of my life? No.
No.
Yeah, more of a stalemate, if anything. But yeah, any last thoughts, Benji, on maybe Aronson? We haven't talked enough about him. It was impressive to win 130 ahead of his breakaway companions. He's mooted to move to Ineos, I think the rumor is, over the winter. So yeah, what do you see for him?
Well, the most impressive part about the time gain he had on the second group, also, we got to keep in mind, he was bridging a gap of, I think, 40 seconds to Soler at that point when he started making the move, and he bridged that. So he did take that time on the group of Vine and so forth. I think you got to keep in mind it's all on altitude. So he's doing this on altitude, means that he can do this quite well, riding on altitude. This is one occasion where it happens. He said after the race that he's surprised that he was able to ride that well on altitude. That's a very positive thing for a GC rider. And I'm pretty sure Ineos is signing this guy as a GC rider. He hasn't shown the full consistency of that yet. He's currently at the way where he's focusing on top 10ing Grand Tours. But if he can get, what is it, like, let's say 2-3% better, is that a top 5 contender for a Tour de France if he get 3% better?
Well, I mean, Vlasov came fifth, Gadu came fourth, Aronson can be better than Gadu. So yeah, maybe you're right. So um, he's can be a better GC contender than Guru. He's got a much better time trial. His problem is steep gradients. On Hazelanas, he had to go slow. And the Giro, he got dropped on steep stuff. This sort of 6% big ring highway climb, absolutely perfect for Aronsman. So it depends on the parkour of the race. Can he win World Tour GC 1 week races on Ineos, the right ones? Yeah, I think he can.
I think so as well. And there's also the aspect where they had their entire process with Geraint Thomas back in the day. I feel like they can do something similar with an Arnsman to improve him even better in his climbing performances. Now, obviously, they're somewhat different riders at the start. I think Thomas was a tiny bit better already when it comes to the steeper sections from his cobble history. But when it comes to Arnsman, I think there is improvement to be made on that terrain as well. And I do expect Ineos to make him better over the coming year. But hey, we'll talk about Arnsman more once we get a confirmation on that Ineos transfer, and when it comes to other Ineos transfers, perhaps in a transfer recap. But that's, I'm afraid, all I have to say about this stage. I enjoyed it.
Yep, congrats to the still only 22 years old at the end of his Neo Pro deal. Very young Timon Aronsman. Congrats to him. And yeah, interested to see where he goes in the future. But that's all from us today. Thanks to Zwift for supporting the pod as always. And we'll see you the rest day recap tomorrow.